On November 17 at West Coast Pro's Whiplash, Chris Hero makes his long-anticipated return to the ring against a familiar foe, Timothy Thatcher. It's the return of a rivalry that has spanned multiple promotions through the years, going all the way back to the early 2010s. Before they lock horns once again, let's take a look back at the past encounters between two of independent wrestling's great tacticians. This first bout is more of an interesting novelty than a key part of the series. Here we see Chris Hyde taking on Bryce Braxton Collins. It's a short bout that provides an early insight into the strategies these two would utilize later on. Bryce focuses his attack on Hyde's arm, trying to grind him down to the mat, while Hyde focuses on striking. In a concise match, Hyde hits a rolling elbow to get the pinfall win. Four years later, and much has changed. Thatcher has begun making a much bigger name for himself on the American independent scene. Meanwhile, Chris Hero is a couple of years removed from his first run in NXT, and has been greeted back on the indies as a returning god. The tension in the air for this match is palpable. Despite not being in one of Evolve's regular cities, the crowd is red hot with dueling chants. For a good 3 minutes before the bell rings, the San Jose fans are roaring with anticipation for this dream matchup. Hero can't help but take his time, soaking in the electric atmosphere. Thatcher, however, is all business. Once the two finally engage in the ring, it's clear that Thatcher has an answer for basically everything that Hero has to throw at him. It takes Hero's famous striking to get any kind of purchase on Thatcher. Hero has to shift up the pace of the match by bringing the fight to the floor to gain the advantage. Hero finally becomes the man in control of the pace as Thatcher tries to fight back. At one point, Thatcher even goes for Inoki-esque grounded kicks, but Hero drops a massive senton onto him to cut him off. From here, the bullying tactics of mid-2010s Chris Hero come to the fore. It's a barrage of big boots and stiff elbows. All the while, though, Thatcher grits his teeth through the onslaught and finds the openings to try and get back into the fight. It's a pair of big suplexes that suit him well, but again, Hero's elbows prove a stopping force. Finally, Hero's able to land a string of big elbows all in a row that drop Thatcher, only for Thatcher to immediately grab a Fujiwara armbar in a desperate move that gets him the quick and sudden submission victory. In an excellent match, not only does Thatcher withstand the knockout artist's blows, but also proves that he's a submission threat at any time. 4 months later, these two meet again. This time, Timothy Thatcher comes in as the newly crowned Evolve champion, making his first defense of the title. Similar themes to the Mercury Rising match come through, with Thatcher remaining cool and confident, forcing Hero to go to his big strikes to turn the tides in his favor. Still, Thatcher may be knocked loopy, but Hero's elbows and kicks never can quite get him down, and to make things worse, Thatcher is learning too. Take for example when Hero attempts his big senton again. This time, Thatcher gets his knees up. This forces a change in strategy from Hero too. This time, instead of going directly for the big knockout, he lays some groundwork by attacking Thatcher's ear. This clearly disturbs the champion's equilibrium, but he remains steady enough to fight for his comebacks. It's patience that wins him a big Saito suplex to start turning the tides back in his favor. But Hero's also keen enough to be extra wary of Thatcher's Fujiwara armbar this go-around. Still, Thatcher has new tricks of his own. When Hero goes for his signature death blow, Thatcher blocks it with a headbutt. The champion's resolve makes the challenger so desperate and spiteful that Hero resolves to spitting at Thatcher to frustrate him and open him up for a series of elbows. Just as Hero goes to seal the deal with a gotch piledriver though, Thatcher once again weathers the storm, grabbing Hero's arm and working the challenger down into the Fujiwara for yet another submission win. In 2015, the knockout artist has yet to KO Timothy Thatcher. The energy at the American Legion Hall in Reseda is unlike anything else in pro wrestling. From the get-go in this first round bout of the 2015 Battle of Los Angeles, the crowd is fired up, and once again, Hero takes the time to bask in the crowd's energy. To his detriment though, he retains this habit through the first half of the match. At points where it seems he might have the advantage, he spends too long taking in the crowd, giving Thatcher room to get back into the fight. More than ever, Thatcher seems prepared for Hero's tricks. He makes Hero pay for the stubbornness of trying to kick him off the apron by catching Hero's leg and wrenching it over the top rope. Once again though, Hero goes to enraging Thatcher to open him up for attack. He even spits on Thatcher yet again, which allows Hero to get in a big rolling elbow. When he once again goes for the death blow, Thatcher yet again cuts it off with his headbutt. This time, it's Thatcher that goes for the gotch piledriver, but Hero himself slips out and gets a big elbow in. Still, it's not quite enough to put away Thatcher. Hero follows up with a disgusting tombstone piledriver, only for Thatcher to rise up with a flash Fujiwara yet again. This time though, Hero's ready. He rolls through to escape the hold, and then dips into his old bag of tricks by nailing the Hero's welcome to get a pinfall on Thatcher. Not a KO as Hero might have wanted, but finally he remained adaptable enough to get a win over Thatcher. At the end of 2015, these two would clash again in the opening round of the 2015 Ted Petty Invitational. In this match, we see a much more stripped-down version of the Thatcher-Hero matchup. It feels smaller in scale, but without sacrificing the substance that these two bring to every match. If anything, this match feels like a matured version of the straightforward dynamic established in that first match all the way back in 2011. As then, Thatcher comes in with a very simple strategy: take apart Hero's arm. He's able to make a lot more headway controlling the pace of this match than ever before by working over Hero's arm. Hero once again works to get the match back to a standing position where he can lay in his strikes. He again goes for the death blow, but Thatcher anticipates it, this time headbutting Hero in the bad arm. Thatcher continues going towards the injured limb, but when trying for the Fujiwara, Hero's able to escape. Thatcher takes too long standing up Hero though, allowing Hero to nail a rolling elbow to drop his opponent. Even then, Thatcher nearly gets a flash crucifix pin for the win, but this time it's Hero who catches Thatcher with a backslide for the 3 count. Even then, after the bell, Thatcher's able to grab a Fujiwara on Hero, once again demonstrating how quickly a match could turn in his favor if given the chance to get that submission in. Six months later, the rivalry reignites for the Evolve Championship once again. It's worth noting that there's a sense that this might not be the most significant step in their feud, as both before and after the bell, it's clear that Thatcher's got more urgent matters with Catchpoint on his mind. That being said, this is still a strong match that both repeats and builds on the many themes that the two have established through their work in 2015. This time, Thatcher goes to Hero's leg early. It's a change in strategy, but Hero sticks true to his own, using strikes to regain control. Having found success in flustering Thatcher with underhanded tactics like spitting in the past, Hero now also adds in a much more mean-spirited attack on the eyes and face to potentially open up Thatcher. One of the big themes here, though, is just how familiar both men have gotten with each other. Both are clever enough to anticipate and switch up their tactics in response to attacks being repeated from the previous matches. Hero even attempts the backslide that won him the day in the TPI, but to less success this time around. Going back to his elbow barrage still proves ineffective though, staggering Thatcher but never quite dropping him for the win. Hero's harder to put away this time too, as he's ready for many of Thatcher's counters. He escapes Thatcher going for the arm while countering a gotch piledriver, and instead of falling prey to Thatcher's headbutt cutting off the death blow, Hero beats him to the punch with a headbutt of his own. Thatcher adapts as quick as a dime though, getting the headbutt in on a rolling elbow attempt this time. It's what he needs to lock in the Fujiwara. Hero's ready though and rolls through, but Thatcher again remains as fluid as water, switching into a cross arm breaker to get yet another submission victory over Chris Hero. These two would face off again over 3 years later in the midst of Cassius Ohno's second run with NXT, this time in Progress. In the time since their last bout, Ohno had dedicated much more focus towards remastering his abilities on the mat as the wrestling genius. That comes across in their very competitive and respectful mat exchanges early on in this match. Ohno changes the tone of the match though when he hits a gruesome oblique kick to take out Thatcher's leg, creating a weakness on Thatcher for him to attack. For the first time in the rivalry, we find Ohno in control on the mat, finding ways to torture Thatcher's leg. The loss of control on the mat makes Thatcher feistier, coming across as a wounded animal looking for a way out of a trap. This time, Thatcher's Inoki-esque mat kicks work and creates enough space for him to suplex Ohno. When Thatcher grounds Ohno this time, he's noticeably more aggressive with the striking instead of just focusing on the grappling. Thatcher's in a position now where he has to be the aggressor, lest Ohno get a grip on his ankle long enough to tap him out. Still, the muscle memory from their rivalry years past remains. When Thatcher goes for a Fujiwara, it's almost reflex in Ohno to find a way out immediately. The Fujiwara almost seems to snap Ohno back into his old ways as he looks for a quicker win now. Instead of wrestling to the leg, Ohno goes back to trying to knock out Thatcher with strikes. Even when Thatcher's leg gives way, Ohno doesn't hone in for the kill, but instead tries to prove a point by finally getting the death blow. But Thatcher had that counter figured out years ago, and it's the only opening he needs to get that decisive Fujiwara armbar for yet another submission victory. In their last bout together, Cassius Ohno falls by regressing, and Timothy Thatcher stands victorious through sheer grit and patience. That brings us to West Coast Pro Wrestling. Despite a spirited performance, West Coast Pro Academy graduate JT Thorne gets mauled by Timothy Thatcher. There are moments of hope for Thorne, but Thatcher's a near unflappable wrestler, applying his clinical breakdown on the young man. In a bright flash, Thorne actually grabs his own Fujiwara armbar on Thatcher, and it's an insult that Thatcher doesn't take too kindly to. He attacks both Thorne and security after the bell in a rage. Having made the match that put Thorne in this situation to begin with, West Coast Pro's matchmaker Chris Hero comes down to the ring to save Thorne. Lost in his rage though, Thatcher attacks Hero as well, nailing a brutal Saito suplex on the matchmaker. The attack sparks a brawl between Hero and Thatcher in the crowd that has to be forcibly pulled apart by West Coast Pro officials and roster members. And that's when the challenge gets laid down.
Hey Tim, what you doing November 17th? It's gonna be Timothy Thatcher versus Knockout Artist.
All in all, this feud through the 2010s is an important one to independent wrestling in North America. Through these matches, Chris Hero, as one of the final mainstays of the 2000 Super Indie era, helped elevate Timothy Thatcher to have a similar importance to the indie scene of the 2010s. Each match builds on the last and also noticeably feels distinct each time it finds a new home in the wrestling landscape, making it a series worth enjoying as a whole. On November 17th, at West Coast Pro Whiplash, the knockout artist Chris Hero returns to the ring for the first time in over 3 years to take on a familiar foe in Timothy Thatcher. The match is set for San Francisco, less than 50 miles from San Jose, where their rivalry started in earnest in 2015. With nearly 4 years between them and their last match, it will be a must-see attraction to find what Hero and Thatcher bring to a new decade of independent wrestling. Admittedly, Hero's facing an uphill climb for his return, trying to shake off years of inactivity as well as overcoming a 4-3 deficit against his rival. Will Thatcher once again tap out Chris Hero, or will the knockout artist make good on his name and finally KO Thatcher on the way to victory? Find out on November 17th, West Coast Pro Whiplash. There's 9 matches on the card. Kevin Blackwood versus Jaya Jewel, Derek Dillinger versus a mystery opponent, South Pacific Savages versus Los Suavecitos, Rachel Ellering versus Sandra Moon, Tankman and Beef versus Steve Macklin and Weston Blake, Brian Keith versus Alpha Zoe, Starboy Charlie versus Chris Bay for the West Coast Pro Championship, Masha Slamovich versus Johnny Robbie, and the highly anticipated in-ring return of knockout artist Chris Hero versus Timothy Thatcher. West Coast Pro Whiplash streams live on their official YouTube page, then available on demand afterwards on IWTV.